you do it, and then you're evaluated on the basis of achieving that goal according to the plan. But when it comes to these types of complex issues, that plan becomes obsolete. It's moronic to think that you could, like an IKEA bookshelf, understand the steps that we need to do either digitalization or the sustainability, the green transition. But we're indoctrinated in being measured as professionals. So ego comes into in the play. How am I as a leader? How am I as a politician? How can I demonstrate my professional value according to a plan? And when that plan is faulty, lazy journalists or angry citizens will say, why didn't you think of that? And we're not used to standing up to citizens or media or shareholders saying, I don't know. And that was part of the plan, that I don't know. It's an iterative process. And for us in the startup community, that's second nature. But the way many parts of society is built, it's not based on that. And I think that is the mindset issue.
And this is, then bottom line, what do I do? So bottom line, I'm working with the enterprises that have started to understand that the old way, the planned way is not working. But we have no clue how to be hypothesis driven. So essentially what I did at Vattenfall, essentially what I do at Scania now, is basically working together with Scania to understand that. So it really means from the whole operating model, how do we set up our budgets, to how do we do our resource allocation, to how do we look at projects, flip them into product thinking, flip them into hypothesis-driven innovation thinking, how a process becomes product that is continuously evolving. That becomes a completely different steering model. It becomes a completely different setup. And to make it even worse, cross-functional, because you need to have the domain expertise, you need to have the innovation expertise, you need to have the technology expertise, you need to have the data expertise, you need to have the AI expertise. And by the way, you need to have the customer understanding as well. So basically, when you go to putting that into operation, that when someone has done the work and lifted the game, and someone has made the management consultant slides to say you need to innovate, and then you put that into a normal traditional company and they say, yep, we are ready for this, but we don't know how. This is the next level. I think this is what the DARE awards and the DARE community is all about, to figure this out. And you cannot do it only looking at this as, oh, I have AI, so I'm going to talk with the expert in AI. I'm an academic researcher in AI, so I know all about the methodologies on how to do a better model. That's not the real problem. The real problem is this: how do I go from plan-driven to hypothesis-driven in a large enterprise? And by the way, how do I do it in such a way so I harvest best practices from one part of the business into another part of the business?
Two things both of you said stood out or stuck with me. One thing you said, Aurore, was you mentioned that the process is second nature to startups. I mean, when you're starting a new company, you love inventing that process or actually questioning the process of the old, and then slowly you get molded into the old way of thinking because your investors want you to transform so they can sell you off to LPs eventually. And you, Henrik, you mentioned you work with clients or leaders who, I would say, if I paraphrase it, put value or realize the value of the process itself and not the goal. Like the old cliche.
Yeah, but you feel safe.
Yeah, but the old cliche, the journey is more important than the goal. But all our systems are set up to only measure value by the derived goal. But we need to start to understand and measure the value of the process itself. Right?
But I think we're not being honest about what the whole journey of what innovation means. So the Silicon Valley-esque sect, which it is, and I love so many parts of it, and I despise so many parts of it. And one part that I find particularly challenging is many of these buzzwords become unnuanced and mean like superfluous things. I don't know if that's the proper word here, but so innovation in itself is just exciting. It's forward-leaning. It's the next new thing. It's money in the bank. It's the cover of Forbes, whatever it is. But with innovation comes lots of hardship, lots of risk-taking, lots of money lost, learning opportunities, i.e. failures. But we don't really talk about what this encompasses. And if you if you look at it from a startup point of view, we've decided when you decide to build a company, your storytelling is about moving into the unknown. But from a corporate point of view, the storytelling can't be that you're moving into the unknown, because you have to sit on a foundation, and therefore it becomes problematic to deal with the necessary backside, if you want, but exciting if you want, part of innovation. So I think we need to be honest about what it means.
I think you're spot on, and to flip it a little bit, what you said, it's all about the journey. Damn right it is, and if you embrace the thought. For sustainability is a good example, that you're damn arrogant if you think that you can define the solution, how that will look like in 5 years or 10 years. Then you're not humble to the problem, the enormity of the complexity. The same goes with AI. So if you embrace the fact that we are here right now, and the traditional axis to be gap analysis, project, measure, goal, that is dysfunctional, it won't fly. Then what you're starting to flip it to is like, how do I create the engine? How do I have the core processes that allows me to fail fast, to fail cheap, to iterate and faster take me to the next level and to the next level. So the whole mind shifts from project to product, in the sense that I'm starting with an MVP and then I'm scaling on that. How do I get that MVP thinking into a core process like, business control? You can.
I have a suggestion.
Yeah.
So I've been thinking a lot about it, and there's several interesting analogies in this context, because this conversation has been had a lot about complex versus complicated.
Yeah.
And complicated, obviously, we know all the parameters, and complex, we don't know the parameters.
Exactly.
And given the fact that I'm now on my 4-year journey as a parent, I realize that parenting is a really interesting analogy, because we start parenting thinking that we know
all the answers.
Yes, and we think there is a manual to creating happy children, successful children, whatever the goal is. And then you realize it's such a smorgasbord of different things. It's everything from DNA to the what they ate, to their mood, to my mood, to the kids, to everything around.
To the school, to the conference, to the sports they can do.
There is no plan. So everything that you thought you could do, you just have to chuck out of the window and then trial and test. And different things will work on different days as well. So you'll never have a manual. But we accept that. In parenting, we accept, in order for it to take my child from infancy to adultcy, I have a rough idea of what I want to achieve. And I know that I need to work on it every day, and I need to rework my plan every single day. And I don't know how to make a budget, and I don't know what resources I need. And for those who are in it or have gone through it or sat next to it, that resonates, because it's an accepted way of thinking. And I think the child analogy also works in the startup, because you give birth to your little baby, etc. But I think we need to look at it more.
But I think that analogy is perfect between a child and a startup, because the model of the investing in startups is we're investing in 30 and we're hoping one's going to succeed and the other's going to go under. All along the way, so all those startups, people learn, they have lessons, they do failures, and we're giving them the opportunities to become more flexible, derive more value out of those individuals. But if we let 29 go under, they're not going to generate that value back into society. And that's cognitive value that has no climate emissions at all. And the same goes for a child. They're born with endless opportunities to see the world in a unique way, and then we put them into school, we limit it, and we put it into more and more constraints. And that's very similar to how organizations operate.
I love this analogy, but let's be. How do you do that analogy so it fits for a 100-year-old company that is global? Let's say Scania. How should the analogy be that we?
Because the only thing that needs to happen is you need to free yourself from the plan.
Yeah.
That is the core of the mindset. And it's been said by General Eisenhower, I don't do plans, but planning is important, or I'm paraphrasing. And finding either military or parental ways to getting the penny to drop that I need to free myself from the plan. It is what we call in Sweden a snuttefilt for leadership. And helping, empowering them, coaching them into being visionary leaders and being able to stand steady in front of criticism, journalists, citizens saying, I don't know, but I know we're going to take this step and I hope to learn, and then I'll take the next step. And that is the plan.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. But now here comes the reality. The reality is that there are fundamentals of how to run a large corporate. And even if you want to do that, first of all, there's a journey to get to a steering where that works. And ultimately, even if you're Google or Amazon, you need to have mechanisms in place for how to work hypothesis-driven. So you need to understand how much money should I invest in this, when should I not invest in this, why should I put all my efforts in this team and not in this team, why should they get more money? So the challenge here is that step one, mindset, fundamentally, let go of the snuttefilt. I like that, by the way. I'm going to keep that. Next one, what do we do instead? Concretely, to have complete anarchy will not fly if you're a Scania or a Vattenfall. It will simply not fly. And by the way, in order to fund the innovation of the new, I need to secure the cash cow of the old. So I need to then balancing what has made me really successful going here, because that is my cash I need in order to fund the new. So this is where I think the real ball game stands. Then when you've done that first is the mindset. Then you need to figure out, how do I organize? How do I steer this? How do I orchestrate this? How do I fund this? How do I govern this?
And I think a lot of voices in this context would say that is the reason why innovation can't happen within corporate worlds.
But I would challenge that. I think
I'm not saying it's true, but I think there is an element of truth in it.
That's the main blocker to innovate. I wouldn't say they can't do it. I would say this is the main blocker.
Yeah.
This is the main blocker. Now, how do you fix it? That's another story we can have.
But I think the problem lies in what you said, and that's the need for governance mechanisms, and the thinking that the governance mechanisms need to be explainable in our old way of thinking. I think we need to trust data more. I mean, no one's asking, how did Google arrive at this answer? It's just better than any other process. Because if you have to come up with an explanatory model that everyone in your 10,000 people organization can understand, that explanatory model is going to take a long time and it's going to be really, really shit.
And both parenting and the green transition have something in common, which is an important driving force that traditional business potentially doesn't have in the same way, and that's fear. And fear as an emotion or anxiety or worry means that you don't give up. So even though you don't have the answers for that, you don't just drop your parenting. Like, this is too hard, this is too expensive, I feel too challenged. You will then cry, and then you will pick yourself up and you will continue in your parenting. And sustainability for those that worry, that continues. But if you have to relate everything to a process and a cost, it is easy to go find a different way of doing it. And that's the interesting piece of locking in. That's also interesting what happens when we are in situations of war. I haven't been, but reading and looking back at historical examples, you do things that you never thought you could or would, because there's only one way, there's only one route. You don't analyze it. And
you can't go back, you need to go forward.
You can't, exactly. So there's some sort of life and death element. And I don't know how you translate that into corporate world. So that's your job, and I don't have to deal with that on a daily basis.
No, but this is a good, very interesting start of this podcast. Straight for some of the core topics.
Life and death.
No, but straight, almost like the pink elephant discussion. We started with the pink elephant discussion that we can do as much tech as we want. If we don't solve innovation and steering and the mindset and how we operate this, because what we are saying then, ultimately, worst case scenario, we can't operate this in a corporate structure. So all the corporates needs to be, they need to cannibalize on themselves. They need to start their incubators. They need to do something else. I personally don't believe that's the case.
No.
But Sometimes,
but the threat of that is interesting. So I think in any transformation, one needs to highlight the different types of pink elephants. And they can be worst case scenarios. If we don't push this,
someone else will, or I need to start up SCBX to compete with normal SCB, as an example.
As an example, I'm going to go no comment here, but okay.
No comment.
But I think it's having devil's advocates. And obviously that's the role of the consultant. You bring someone in externally, in the truth sayer. But I think in many of these transformations, we need to create different types of truth sayers that pushes the mental imagination of where we're going. Yeah. And I think our Swedish activist Greta Thunberg has been one of those truth sayers. She's done tremendous work in pushing the mindset and identifying the blah, blah, blah in a lot of this self-congratulatory, innovative blah, 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 blah.
Do you believe there was a collective sigh of relief from politicians when the pandemic hit, so we didn't have to deal with Greta anymore?
But I think the challenge Greta has is that everyone wants to take a selfie with her, and she's been very vocal about that as well, but not really doing it. It's But you can create as a consultant. You can create the different types of truth sayers in the mental journey that your clients need to go through. Fear is one of them.
This is another topic, like how much can you rely on consultants in this context? I think you need to, but in what ways more importantly? Because if you truly want to change something, if you truly want to build culture, if you truly want to be data-driven, AI-driven, you need to have it in your core, you need to have it in your leadership, you need to have it in your core people. So the consultant role is, I think, for you, as you said, help to be the truth sayers. Even sometimes it can be easier to have someone else to be the really uncomfortable guy, if you can handle it.
Or gal.
Or girl. Thank you. But also holding the hand, giving the confidence, giving the inspiration.
And this is a very important part.
To actually push the internal people to, I dare to do it. I really dare.
And there's several tricks of the trade here. And I think the military breakdown, build-up is one way of doing these transformations. I will first break you, and then I'll build you up to my model of whatever it is. I'm obviously exaggerating. That's not only what the military does. And one of my preferred tools that I use in this is humor. Humor is such a great way of highlighting where the problems lie, creating a camaraderie around a joke, and then hand-holding in that. I love humor.
Yeah, humor you can use to make something which is obviously a pink elephant stupid. You can talk about it in a non-confronting way, and then you can laugh about it, and then you have demystified it, de-armed it, sort of thing, and then you can be constructive about it.
Because you can harpoon someone elegantly. So the penny drops, the criticism is clear, but there's a huge face-saving opportunity with humor.
Nice.
Yeah, very nice. I was thinking when you spoke about the fact that we don't have Peter Thiels or Eric Weinsteins in Sweden who actually just spend hours and hours telling the truth like it is. We're lowering it down, and we have to wrap it more gently and bridging to, I mean, you're obviously telling the truth like it is and addressing the pink elephant, but it requires a certain amount of fearlessness. And I had the opportunity to meet your sister the other week at Stockholm Resilience Center executive course, and you're both quite fearless. I mean, how does that come about? How did you both become fearless?
I don't know. I don't see myself as fearless, actually.
Okay, you're handling fear in a different way.
Handling fear in a different way. No, I'm genuinely. I think we are both. I shouldn't speak for my sister here, but we are molded in a civil servant's home, and from our entire lives has been about to serve. And our father's career as a diplomat has infused everything that we've done, and so all the conversation around us has been about Where do we want to go? How do we do it? How do we achieve it? And it's been in the interest of some sort of larger. So for me, that has been the way to do it. And therefore, I find this important. And therefore, I will raise my voice and do what I can to contribute to what I think is important right now. So it's not so much fearless as this is what I need to do.
But let's start now with a proper introduction, because now we got personal. But who are we talking to? So welcome, Aurore Belfrage.
Thank you.
Super nice to have you here. We are so excited, and we have so many different topics we could cover.
And you got my favorite food.
Yeah. We have a rider, and if the guest, the rock star showing up, chooses to be clear on her rider, she will get her rider.
There you go.
Very simple. And shout out to Goran, who made that happen. And to any other guests, he takes it as a bet, or what do you call it? As a, if someone asks him, I'm going to get it. I'm going to fix it.
Dare.
That's a dare.
Messi and Aborigine. Like,
okay. Now I'm going to go nuts on Messi and Aborigine. Good. Now, but who is Aurore Belfrage? How do you look at yourself? Like, who are you, and what's your journey?
This food is probably a good starting point, actually. So I'm a self-proclaimed Arab wannabe. And back to my father. So he was the Swedish ambassador to Saudi Arabia in the beginning of the 80s. So me and my sister were young toddlers. I don't know the exact definition of toddler, but I was 5. So I was young, happy, but I remembered everything. And I don't know how this works scientifically, but for something, osmosis, the sand hit my system. So I found the desert and the Gulf and Saudi Arabia fascinating and at home for some reason. So I've spent a lot of time being a tourist in the region. I'm obsessed with aubergine. And
but then we can come into even a side topic, different things, what you can do with an aubergine.
Yes. So aubergine has a really bad reputation on the internet, and I find myself as a lone ranger talking about the importance of aubergine as a fruit, as a vegetable, and I denounce all of you that give aubergine a bad reputation. But I had the opportunity in, 2013, something like that, to combine my obsession with aubergine as a fruit and vegetable and my love for the Middle East with tech.
Now.
And it was completely by chance, and I would love to say that I had a big plan and I knew exactly what I was doing and I implemented my big plan. But it grew very incrementally and led to a 2-year stand-up comedy-esque roadshow in the Middle East. So I was in 9 cities, and I joked about the bullshit of startups, where I had been a co-founder in a very hyped fintech business with one of, I think, Sweden's great entrepreneurs, Hjalmar Winblad and Andreas Ehn, and we were 7 co-founders, and we built this fintech play, and Reid Hoffman, the founder of LinkedIn, invested, and Niklas Sennström and Atomico invested, and we raised a lot of money, and we made all the mistakes in the book. So there was a lot of material to joke about, and I decided to take mistakes / learnings / a lot of the Silicon Valley hyped buzzwords and transform that into a little stand-up routine that I did in 9 cities in the regions, as I said. And then I took the local entrepreneurial heroes up on stage and let them talk about what they had built, which allowed, well, we know now, and it was relatively common obviously in the Silicon Valley, this whole fuck-up culture where you talk about your mistakes. But it was quite novel in the region 2014, 2015. So we created a very open, and in my point of view, very sweet, honest dialogue about how hard it is to build a business. It's not a straight line from idea to success. And what happens when someone exposes their jugular and talks about their mistakes, so that's my second powerful tool next to humor, is
talking about your own mistakes.
Yeah, the humbleness of saying, that went wrong, this didn't work, we tried this, we thought that, hyperbole, and then nothing of that happened, which obviously lets people share their war stories, which created a a lovely atmosphere. And we were sponsored by local banks and telcos, and as well as some Swedish players. Istanbul, Dubai, Amman, Tunis, Erbil, after the Erbil, Qatar, Cairo, Riyadh, and Beirut. And I learned a lot. I met some fantastic startups and companies. I met some lovely VCs, incubators, and obviously there's a parallel. So any startup community that you go to in the globe, it will be the same words and the same one-liners, and everyone has a quote from Peter Thiel, etc., which makes it a family. But the next layer of that onion, especially in a region like the Middle East, is empowerment. How do we use technology to create new companies, jobs, innovation that comes from where you are, hope, dignity, pride, etc. So what started as an opportunity for me to travel around the best part of the world and eat as much aubergine as I wanted, it dawned on me, this is a way to tell the story of entrepreneurship and make it more accessible. Because and my mental goal there, we've diverged completely from the topic, and we're now into my Middle Eastern adventure.
This is the rabbit hole. We love
this
them.
is the rabbit hole. I apologize, but really not, because I love talking about it. But my mental goal was, if we can create a structural change where mothers brag to other mothers about their children being entrepreneurs, then you've, on a societal level, succeeded in creating job creators as opposed to job seekers. So that became my mission. And obviously, 2015, you had a lot of extremism, and it was a conflict-ridden time anyway. So it also became, for me, a long-term opportunities to contribute to creating stable societies and jobs in a region where a lot of people are under 30.
Do you speak Arabic, by the way?
See, I know key phrases, and my inner me says yes. So I spoke Arabic as a child. In a formal, actual way, no is the real answer. But my subconscious spiritual me does.
Yeah.
But if you back up the tape, so this was around 2013, 14.
15, yeah.
15, this is. And you had a quite exciting ride in order to get you there. But so let's back it up now. 5 years old, Saudi Arabia. Now, where
took a big leap there.
took a bit of a leap. So where is your schooling, and where is this sort of pivotal moment shaping you up to 2015?
I moved to Sweden when I was 9.
Yeah.
And we spoke Swedish at home, but this AIAW business was just very theoretical. And I was well acquainted with Pippi Longstocking, but I wasn't Swedish at that point. But I slowly became at least Swinglish, and I struggle to speak proper Swedish, and I find it very annoying that probably almost on a bi-weekly basis. So where do you come from? I'm Swedish. I speak perfect Swedish.
I remember.
Yeah.
I remember meeting you at RAP, and I was like, "What country is she from? I cannot place this accent."
Which I find so annoying.
That's beautiful. That's great, isn't it? Global.
No,
You're global.
Yeah, but if you really think that you can master a language, and you get that question quite a lot, you realize I don't master the language, and now I'm fine with it. But
so then you 9 growing up in Sweden, starting to be picking up Swedish culture and going to school and all that. What sort of, when you're starting getting older here, like what direction did you take for university, or like what was your goal when you started to become?
So anyone that's listening that knows me also knows that I wasn't the cool kid in the class, but I did well, and I raised my hand, and I had the best grades, and I was the classic good girl. And that, what comes with, and we were talking about it before we started, this is more men than females in the data club, but what comes with this dutiful good girl concept takes quite a long time to make peace with, because there is a lot of positive attributes and you're emotionally encouraged in that role, unless you're like really teased. But and you talk about university there. So I went to Stockholm School of Economics, as a good girl should do. And how did I rebel before that? I studied political science at the University of Lund and art history.
The hippie part.
The hippie part, exactly. So that goes to show the level of rebelness. So when you say you're fearless, my inner child laughs a little, because I've really followed the route of what you should do. And there's good and bad in that. I'm right now listening to Madame Albright's book, Madame Secretary, and she reads it herself, and she talks a lot about, and I've felt I'm in no way going to compare myself with her brilliance, but I see similarities in this good girl and her father, and going through the school system, and also having her father with her in work and trying to break the mold in that. It's there's a whole podcast about finding your voice and then using that. And it's taken me way too long. I wish I'd had much more guidance in what do I want, what do I need, how do I do that, how do I achieve it. I've played, and I think one of the reasons why I've loved the Middle East, it's been escapism for me. It's a beautiful part of the world. And the food, it's unquestionable. I don't have to I don't have to justify the aubergine, so to speak. But it's also been hundreds of miles away from home, and a place where I could build something and explore my voice and what I wanted to do.
But what is the... sorry.
I have a burning question, and this is quite a tangent, so you'll have to pull me back.
Is this a recipe?
No, this is
what's the best baba ganoush?
And I have to tread lightly here, but this is... I have two teenage daughters, who soon to be 20 and 18. So this good girl, I don't know what to call it, good girl obstacle or
paradigm.
Yeah, paradigm. I'm happy to see there's more and more networking of women helping each other into powers and pushing through the glass ceilings. But would you say that this good girl structure is holding women back? That they're it's ingrained that they have to stick within those constraints.
Yeah, and I think I'm still partly analyzing it, so you're getting a snapshot of where I am mentally at the moment, and I definitely don't have any answers. But I think one of the things for me has been pivotal is realizing that I can choose things. What do I want? And for many men, that's like, yeah, of course. What do you want? But I wasn't really asked those questions in that way on a consistent basis. It was more like achieve a route, and it's much more subtle than that. And it's not. It is very interestingly structural, and I'm still struggling with standing firm in my decisions and formulating them in a way that is much more confident. So I've been taught, and again, I don't think deliberately taught, but I've been taught to package what I want in a acceptable way within a given structure. And I also, you talked about you take these huge amounts of opportunity and you put them to schooling. My big criticism to the Stockholm School of Economics, as it was 25 years ago, was there's one way of doing it. It's a very much a factory, and if you have a factory mindset, that just perpetuates in that, and the entrepreneurial spirit is not really built in that.
But where's your pivotal moment? Because you are quite a fantastic human being, and you're doing so much things, and you are not really following a one-on-one path anymore. So what is happening? What do you remember a pivotal moment, or when you're thinking from university, or how is this your evolution into what I would say quite a different state of mind today to probably when you entered into university, as you describe it?
And you can either believe in luck and circumstances, or you believe in the universe. And I'm becoming much more spiritual. So the universe guided me little, but so it wasn't my complete plan. But there are a few I found a lot of the traditional things that I was supposed to do at Handel so boring. Like I really couldn't muster up. Therefore, and I'm my mother's daughter there. Actually, she's better, and my daughter's even more. They're very competitive, and I'm quite competitive as well. And I realized I'm not going to win. I'm not going to win in this finance, investment banking, McKinsey consultancy game. I'm not going to get those grades, and I'm not going to get that job.
Because it's too boring.
Because it's too boring, or I'm not good enough. I realize there's a smorgasbord of reasons why I'm not going to win at this game. I must create a different game.
So this was part of your game. Some point you saw, okay, if I go down that route, I don't really think it's the most fun, and there are people who really love it and are brilliant at it. What is my game?
What is my game? And I have to, I don't think I've told her, but one of my best friends said at that time period, was saying that she, one of her life hacks was to create a route for herself where there were no predecessors. And I just found that genius. Because then you can construct it into what you want, but I don't want to give myself too much credit because I wasn't really there in creating what I wanted yet. That's taken me longer to create parameters according to that. So it was much more according to traditional winning. But if I find a route with no predecessors, I'm not compared in a traditional way, and therefore I can leapfrog into it.
This is a red ocean, blue ocean strategy.
Yes. Plus, yeah. And then on top of that, I have an activist heart and a sense of serve. And
so what was the path? What was the game plan? So what path, what's the path we're talking about here concretely from Handels or the Stockholm School of Economics?
So Stockholm School of Economics, we're still on the traditional trajectory here. And I moved to London. I wanted back out of Sweden. And my first job was a fantastic but quite weird first job as a speechwriter. And I had amazingly, again, I think the universe, an amazing boss. She was everything that I wasn't. So I was square from Handels, and she was very confident in her brilliance. And she allowed... she wanted me to know everything. What did you think of the article on page 17 on the Financial Times? So I had to know, and I need to have an opinion on everything. And then at lunch, she wanted to choose a new lipstick or a scented candle. And it sounds so banal now, but for me it was such an epiphany. You can be a brilliant, intellectual, cognitive, demanding leader and like lipstick, which was in her case, or whatever it is, which for me broke the mold. And the working as a speechwriter was fascinating. You learn how to write, you learn how to distill your thoughts, you learn how to understand communications in the traditional sense. I'm going to say something and I want it to land in a certain way. I need to understand who is going to listen, and I need to decide on someone else's behalf, by the way. Do I want to be funny? Do I want to be serious? Do I want to create goosebumps? Or do I want no one to notice that I even was there? And being on the bottom of the hierarchy, the junior person that just does the first draft, I learned something really interesting about diplomacy and corporate structures. So I wrote the first draft. I wrote 300 speeches. I don't know, a big number. You write the first draft, and then it goes through the layers of middle management. And what I understood then is the way middle management demonstrates their value is by criticizing. So back came this crap that was much more conservative. And it took me a while to realize it's not me, it's they have to contribute by changing, which was a very humbling and excellent lesson to learn. I'm hearing my own echo here. It's fascinating. And then learning how to write. And then after 2 years of doing that, I realized I've now written 300 speeches, roughly for the same person. Writing another 100 won't add anything here. And back to circumstances. So my boyfriend at the time, that was going to be my husband and going to be my ex-husband, wanted to leave London. and moved to Gothenburg.
And where were you mentally at that stage? Were you ready to leave? Because you mentioned no. So you would have written another 100 speeches.
I would happily have written another 100 speeches for sure. I loved it
because I find it fascinating. I mean, you had the sands of Saudi Arabia in your blood, kind of grinding away, blocking you from just accepting the factory of Sweden, and that catapulted you to the UK, where you met this woman who gave you the opportunity to see the world differently and expanded the mind. But still, you needed even more. You needed that pull back to Gothenburg to take the next step.
And Gothenburg, for me, it's interesting in hindsight, and there's nothing wrong with Gothenburg. It just wasn't on my mental map of how one moves forward. And one goes from Stockholm to London, and then you can have a long list of exotic places.
Seldom said words. Moving forward to Gothenburg. No, yeah.
But in reality, it's a pivotal moment, because it was moving forward to Gothenburg, because I had nothing. I had to leave my job. I had to quit my job in the name of love, which was kind of against this good girl thing. Why am I doing this, really? Going to a place where I didn't know anyone, I didn't have a network. Sweden is small, so you always have a network, but it wasn't my natural habitat. And had to kind of start over. And my boss said, "This is a great opportunity because you don't have any operational experience. You need to have a P&L responsibility." And I was like, I vaguely remember what P&L means from Handels, but having a profit and loss accountability and a budget and all these planning things that we were talking about wasn't really. I'd written big important speeches for big important people, but that's a side function. It's an intellectually challenging, interesting side function, but you're not building anything. So it was obviously a huge opportunity. And because I was only 27, I still hadn't, and I was moving out of my conservative play. Plus, I've never been a stickler for networks and hierarchies in that sense. So I wasn't a good girl in being scared of hierarchies. That was never been a challenge of mine. So I researched Gothenburg, and as we know, there's Volvo. And then there's a few other companies, and I sent out a little crappy CV and some cover letters, and that didn't work. So I started calling people, and then I found, this is a pivotal moment. On the internet, I saw a 7-minute corporate film made by Stena Metall, men and women in hard hats and containers talking about metal recycling and the future and sustainability and metal trading. And with bombastic music to it. I was like, that's where I want to be. I'm sure there's a P&L somewhere in that container. And because I didn't understand how things are done, I called the CEO, who we could joke about it afterwards. I said, "Hi, my name is Aurore Belfrage, and I'd like to be a scrap dealer." And he said, "Of course you should be a scrap dealer." He must have been laughing his head off. But I had the universe had granted me the opportunity.
So he know if you can get yourself access all the way to me, you will be able to sell.
Exactly.
No problem. The qualification was that you could reach him and get him on the phone. I reckon that's how you sold it.
Most probably, I haven't thought of it from that point of view, but you're probably right.
Beautiful.
And then I moved into scrap dealing and metal trading. And I was the interim CEO for the Finnish business, and then for the Czech business, and for the Italian business. And I knew nothing.
And quite fast, because you came in, maybe you come in a different way then. So
and I was different.
Yeah.
So what my closest boss knew, and I mean, testament to great leadership, in order to build something different, and we're back to where we started, you need a different mindset.
Yeah.
And the way they formulated it to me, and I realized afterward was very true, they were very Gothenburg, and they were recyclers and metal traders. And I was none of that. And they were going, and the European legislation had just changed, and they wanted to move into new markets. And I got the opportunity to help them in the European expansion of how to recycle electronics, computers, refrigerators, etc.
But is this also a starting point of even going more deeper into the thinking of sustainability and all that, or is that something that you had already earlier?
No, I didn't have it then in that sense the way I have it now.
But I can
It's
even
much
imagine
newer.
that it's quite interesting to be exactly in that spot, working hardcore operational with what everybody's talking about, recycling and circular economy. You were living it, you were dealing it, so to speak.
Yeah, but my reality was much different. So this is 2004. No, I graduated 2000. This is 2006. And so my reality was I both in the Finnish scrapyard, but very much in the Czech scrapyard, where I was. I started every morning by wiping rat shit off my desk. And for me, that was my first cultural clash. Like coming from a very posh, privileged urban society, I'm now in a scrapyard with rat poo everywhere. And then you get over that, and then it's the quick maturing of what it's like to build a business and lead new processes and change.
But what is your main core learnings? Like that you really can. Because to do what you did there, I think it's, and that advice, by the way, to have a P&L and lead and operations, to recruit, to make operations work. I think it's a super good advice. But what was your main? If you look back at it, what part of the puzzle did you get from there that you think you are still taking with you?
It's that success isn't what it looks like. Like I cried every day. I cried every single day. And that was obviously because I'm prone to crying, but it's also because I was young and I was doing lots of things that I'd never done before. And you don't have to cry every day. So there's the adult equivalent or the mature professional's equivalent. But you doubt yourself every day. Like doing all these things that are transformational are difficult. You have to take, there is no black and white. It's 1,000 shades of gray. And especially when we come to transformations of different types, as well as parenting, you don't exactly know what you're going to do, and you don't know the outcome of everything that you're going to do, and you're observed and measured according to very clear parameters. So I know what I'm being measured at, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen in that. So the learning is that you have to have faith, you have to be empathic, you need to trust, and if I continue the stereotypical riffing off this good girl, you need to leave Stockholm School of Economics, and you need to leave the Excel sheet that is one tool in your smorgasbord of leadership. And what I learned is it's much more about people, communications, empathy, making mistakes, dealing with those mistakes, and transforming that into learning, all that type of cliche. And you can read about that, but unless you're sitting there crying in a Czech scrapyard.
Isn't this the core topic? I would summarize this do you learn to deal with it? And when you learn to deal with it, there is not one tool in your toolbox. It's like whatever works. And this clearly didn't work, so I need to go the human path, or I need to go the tough path, or I need to go a different path. I need to find a side, deal with it. Like when you are 100% operational and you get responsibility and something is in the shits or in the goods, doesn't matter. You have things happening, you've never done them before. What are you going to do? You're going to cry? Yeah, and maybe a little bit, but then
you just get on with it.
You get on with it, right?
And before we switched on the microphones, we talked about solving. And I think, again, that as a verb creates a false pretense is what's going to happen. There is no beginning and end in solving. Then that's back to school. You have a test and you got a grade, and you move on. In math, you can solve a problem. And all the mathematicians out there go, you can't solve a mathematician problem. But in the easy math, 1 + 1, you can solve it. But when it comes to many of this, the mindset is, just as you said, to use your word, perpetual beta.
Yeah, and isn't that the interesting thing? We need to solve the climate crisis. We need to solve the AI divide. It doesn't work like that. No. It simply doesn't work like that. We need to deal with it. We need to get on with it, and we need to learn and improve on it. I think then I would argue another word. Did you learn anything about grit in this job?
Well, afterwards you realized it, but it's not like an open. I didn't have it as an open strategy, but I need to solve a babysitter issue here because my babysitter and daughter are making pepparkakor and they can't find the kavel. What's kavel in English?
Use one of the wine bottles.
Yeah. What is it? Kavel. What is it in English?
Roller.
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 When you do a cinnamon.
What's it called? The roller pin.
Is it?
Okay, I've asked them if they've solved it because it was 20 minutes ago and she's typing. So this is the good cliffhanger. Nej. Fan min flaska.
But I want to continue on the grit thing because I found it fascinating because I find a strong connection between that, crying because you're out of your debt, but the go-to solution, I think both for men and women are often, okay, I'm just going to deal with it. I'm just going to grind through this. But what you mentioned, like realizing or accepting that there's no goal. I'm never going to be done with this to-do list. Did you come to that epiphany during this period or did it come later?
One of the smart decisions I took, because I was promoted to managing director of a scrapyard at 27. And my boss said, technically you're kind of too young, you haven't done this. He didn't say that, he said something different. But I realized that was true. So I don't know where this maturity came from, but I said one of the conditions I have to take that role is that I have an external coach funded by you. So on a weekly basis, I had an amazing coach, shout out Anna Ljungberg, who let me cry and let me talk through all these issues. So I made a lot of learnings throughout the process because I had someone. And that is something that I can highly recommend to anyone in any type of learning curve, having an external person to talk to, either as a professional or not, because there is no end goal. You can't solve it. It's just an ongoing to-do list, and you're a marathon runner in that, and there's so much to learn.
So you're saying Stockholm School of Economics didn't teach you
prepare you to
ask for help?
So my big disclaimer, because is that was the Stockholm School of Economics 25 years ago. This time around, it's a completely different institution, or I'm sure it is, or I don't know, but it could be. But what my boss told me at the time, which I found highly offending, he said, again, a pivotal moment, Aurore, you are average smart, but above average tenacious. And I mean, I'm the good girl. I had all the best grades. I'm not average smart. So I completely singled down on the insult, which is you're average smart. Instead of realizing...
He said something really beautiful.
He said something really beautiful. And this smart thing is a commodity.
Yes.
It's having the grit or the stamina.
Tenacity, grit, stamina. I think that's the key word.
To just not let go.
Yeah.
And obviously I was at times, and I've always been throughout my career, out of my depth. But not letting that be a blocker in creating your own learning curve or doing whatever it takes, or just realizing anyone would be out of their depth here. I mean, I was joking the other day on stage. I would love to hire someone that had a 10-year pedigree in global transformation of decarbonization. She doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist.
So, and we just have to accept that.
Do you still have the same ratio balance between smartness and grit? Or have that changed?
I've completely accepted that I am average smart. And I wear that with pride. I'm average smart.
But this is taking us into a journey now, and I'm just going to summarize a couple of things you're doing, and I want you to guide us a little bit what order this has happened and how you see it, because we can talk about you as a tech investor, as a board member, entrepreneur, and part of communities in terms of driving both sustainability and AI. So in what order should we talk about those things? If you're trying to do it a little bit chronologically, or how?
You're being very conservative here and doing it in a chronological order. And
you don't need to. Flip it, please.
I'm joking. But what I learned recently is, because I spend my time in an array of different things.
Yeah.
So, and because the world still is hung up on a title and a name. And because I do a lot of public speaking, people find it so annoying that they can't write my name and then one word after.
Yeah, there's a long bio here.
And I'm not going to satisfy their need of the one word in that. But the common denominator, which is interesting, is not what, but why. So I'd say everything that I do right now is under the umbrella. There's two umbrellas. One, and there's a Venn diagram in that umbrella.
Yeah.
It is worried about the green transition and climate change. And the other umbrella that's parallel but has, in a Venn diagram is parenting. So a lot of time, I'm a single mom, so a lot of time is spent figuring out this huge responsibility of being a mother and the practicalities of that. But everything else in terms of professional is right now mainly driven by that why. So board positions tend to right now be supporting in transition. So from a board point of view, how do you transition? The investment side, and I'm a Muni angel and not a very impressive big deep pocket, but also access to different types of deep pockets, so supporting with a network of investors. And that tends to be in some sort of fossil-free first environment, different types of technologies that support the transition. And I've become very cynical here. And I've done a 180 flip from my good girl, polite, constructive. I now find that there is such a self-congratulatory excitement around green growth. And don't get me wrong, there's lots of opportunities in green growth. Huge amounts of wealth will be created in the next 20, 30 years, building new infrastructure, new products, new energy types. Amazing. But it's not going to be evenly distributed. It's not like we're all going to benefit from this green transition. And as you and I were speaking last night, Kai, about, it's also secondary. It is secondary to the transition itself. We have created a huge mess, and we now need to get ourselves out of this mess. And it's not a calculation, which means that if we don't see the business opportunity in every aspect of what we're doing, it's not like we can decide not to do it. We still have to push forward. So by pushing the narrative of green growth too much, we are ignoring some of the difficulties in this transition. Again, same as the difficult parts of innovation. We need to be honest, because some things will become more expensive, some things will be harder to do, and maybe after it we will find the fossil-free version of doing what we've wanted to do, but not necessarily everything. I can tell my face is now getting redder. I'm getting hotter and
but
closer.
it's like, but this passion then. So when did that passion for this why get sparked?
So back to my sister, who you met the other day, Cookie Katarina, as she's more formally known. She had this epiphany much earlier than I did, and she has educated me, and she's allowed me to understand and learn what we need to do, why we're not doing it, and why we're behind, and that sparked my own journey. And we don't have a exactly similar path in that, and we do different things in this transition. But she was very much pivotal in pushing me. I left EQT Ventures for lots of different reasons, but we invested in Peltarian with you. But one of the things that I wanted to do was to support capital that moved from some sort of commercial capital entities, venture, whatever, into technology that had a public entity as a client. I was seeing there's so much money that's going to fantastic, beautiful businesses that are building great products where the end consumer or company is corporate or private. And that works. But as soon as someone wants to build for schools or infrastructure or
Public sector,
the public sector is still hamstrung by old thinking, different types of processes, hiding behind procurement legislations that is built for another era, another problem. I just felt a huge urge to be how can I bridge these two worlds in order for...
So you're talking about now sustainability, you talked about investment and tech.
I'm talking about a lot of things. You've given me these aubergines and a microphone, so I'm just going on off tangents after tangents. So I apologize for that. But it's all your fault.
We love it. We love it.
I have a burning area of discussion that got me so excited when I was asked to join this.
Yeah.
And that is, and you can pause this.
No, I mean,
but,
I think we skipped this trying to be chronological.
Okay.
What's your career?
Great.
Moving into that.
No one gives no one cares.
Because
So-
one thing I'm struggling with, or something I need an answer for, is why do we need to transition into a sustainable world? Because 99% of the times, I mean, I have an answer that I'm formulating for myself, but 99% of the times when I'm with people who work in sustainability, the answer is because we need to work in a more sustainable way. And I'm like, no, you just skipped the purpose, the reason, the explanation. So what's the answer?
Well, it depends on how you. I think it's a chess game, and there are different scenarios in that chess game where you can end up. And I don't know if this is the part of the answer, but we're heading towards civilizational collapse, and 70% of mammals are extinct. And we are creating big parts of the world will be inhabitable. This is the life and death question, and we are so in either in denial. But the father of my daughter, who's an addict, has taught me about the concept of addiction and how we've built a structure and a system and economy where we're addicted to more and growth without completely analyzing what that leads to. I mean, okay, we can count the money that we've created in that and the profits and the bottom line, but there's no big philosopher talks about the correlation of happiness and money and it being so it's the survival of the concept of humanity.
Because this is what I'm after. You're for Homo sapiens still being on this planet.
Still, yes.
Yeah.
I might change my mind, and that's my disclaimer.
Yeah.
But because
Or surviving.
Yes, but I might change my mind if this is a time capsule that we're not worthy of that.
Yeah. Because I think this goes back to the pink elephant discussion. A lot of the times we just skip that part, and we're discussing the general stuff. I didn't hear this once mentioned in Glasgow, that this is the actual thing we're talking about. No, we're just talking about processes and all that. But if we're not discussing the actual purpose, it's going to be much, much harder to get there.
And
So you're
fear is the important part. And when I've met business leaders or politicians that have actually gone through the learning experience and come out of it afraid, then they can put together processes and innovation accordingly.
Because what you're saying here is to really nail down the compelling event, if I put it. What's the urgency? Why we're doing it? And if the burning problem is not actually, we will die. I mean, like that's what we're talking about here, but we're not using that lingo enough. Is that what you're?
Yeah, because when we stop at saying we're going to save the climate, my counter argument is the climate's going to be fine.
Yeah, it's just made different.
Yeah, well, Earth is going to be fine. That's going to jump back. It might take 500,000 years, but it's jumped back before.
Yeah,
it's going to be perfectly fine without us.
So we are talking about us as a species having a proper life on this Earth.
Or a life.
A life.
Yeah, and I definitely don't think we're talking about it. And you don't even have to take it that far for it to be, like we had do the mental experiment of what happens when the Gulf Stream leaves us. Like, if you look at the map, where should Sweden be in terms of climate?
Under ice.
Subarctic.
Subarctic.
So
we're on the same. I mean, like if everything was without the Gulf Stream, we are right now like Iceland, I guess, or subarctic.
Subarctic. So doing a little research, I realized that I learned that depending on We don't know how that could happen. We don't know if it's binary from one day to another, but it potentially could be. And there's so many question marks in that as one of the tipping points. And this is just one of the tipping points I'm picking out. The heat in the ground stays. So it's not. What's the film with the guy in the snow?
Day After Tomorrow, right?
So it doesn't happen.
Scientifically correct film, right?
Yeah, scientifically. So that is a scientifically incorrect film, as I understand it. It doesn't happen from one day to another, but over a course of, say, if we're lucky, months. If it's in the summers, if it's binary from one day to, we don't know. But say that over a short period of time, Sweden or the Nordics would become subarctic. And now I'm speaking very, from my point of view. The Gulf Stream has implications globally, not only for the Swedish weather system.
But let's take the example from the Swedish context.
So for me personally, if you ask me what happens, when you close your eyes at night and it's dark and you think, what do I do if we have a societal breakdown? And I'll start crying now if we go too far down. What do I do if there's a societal breakdown? We have no way of creating energy. Our food production goes down the drain, and we don't have any systems in place to deal with a new reality. And it's not like in an election or anything else. Or a Cold War scenario. You can't go back on it.
But why?
And that scares me profoundly.
But now back to your story here. Why do we choose not to use this rhetoric? Why do we choose to talk about percentage grades up and down and talk about something?
Because as soon as you talk of the way I've done, you are deemed an alarmist. And you're not allowed to be in a corporate setting if you're an alarmist. And that's why Greta's done a fantastic job, because she's allowed a different... And I'm back to my good girl and my polite side. It's not like this is a new insight for me, but it's new that I'm talking about it in this way, because I'm so ingrained in being polite and constructive.
Because for me, this goes back to the discussion we started this with. We're not going to be able to change the structures and the processes unless we have a clear goal, even if the goal is changing. Only when we're honest about what we need to change, we can be agile and start to change things.
But this is the pink elephant discussion. Back to how you transition into data and AI.
But if I do devil's advocate on myself, so the devil's advocate on this, me, what do I do with my child if the Gulf Stream, blah blah. So the other way of thinking, which I have some respect for, but I just can't do it any longer, is humans are such able, flexible, agile, innovative. We've solved our way out of so many challenges before. We're going to do it again. So this whole positive, constructive, build, do together, etc. Technology will solve this. And for me, that doesn't stand, because technology is just a tool. So it needs to be used in a mindset of something else. And you need to therefore set the planetary framework, and you need to set that. So you were talking about how do we create that change, that mindset shift, given that it's difficult. How do we decouple ourselves? And I don't know if this was before or after we turned on the camera. How do we decouple ourselves from planning? But fear is one thing. But I can't go around and scare everyone, and a lot of work is being done in that. But the next layer is regulation. We set a decision. This is the end point where we take oil out of the ground. We set a price on carbon. We stop subsidizing the oil and gas industry. And now I've had half a glass of wine, so I can't remember the number, but it's like 184 billion euros being subsidized from Europe into the oil and gas industry.
To me, also, one layer from a macro perspective is we need to start putting costs on all our actions. Like going forward, all the big, large pension funds are very unregulated in terms of what they invest in. And those are all costs that are occurring now. And if the Gulf Stream changes, What are you going to do with that money?
What are you going to do with that money? And it's a framing question, which I find fascinating. And this is easy for us to sit and say, because if you're sitting on governing that type of pension money, you have frameworks and rules and regulations. So my big disclaimer is I have the advantage of not having that framework around me. And I was challenging one of the big pension funds on stage relatively recently. If you ask the pensioners of Sweden, would you like us to create a big, stable fund for your retirement? They're going to go, yes. But if you reframe the question, would you like us to use our collectively pooled resources to solve the big challenges of our time? Maybe not everyone's going to say yes, but more people than you think will say yes. Because just as you said, Kai, what are you going to do with that money?
Yeah.
Can you imagine being in the US now, in Arkansas? You look out of the window that's no longer a window, and you have tornadoes, and you run with your children, and you have nowhere to go. And then you can say, let's not politicize the weather. We don't know. We can't exactly determine if this is climate change related. Bullshit.
But let's talk about this now, because you say it like this. Like, if everybody talks like this, you would be coined, or you will be seen as an alarmist. So therefore, politically incorrect, we can't do it, we need to do it in another way. If I connect that back, the problem becomes, if we want to talk about tech, if we want to talk about AI or anything like that, it's fairly basic stuff, right? Elon Musk talks about first principles. You need to have a quite clear problem to solve, and you need to have a quite clear understanding for where you're going in order to even iterate in the right direction. So as long as so we can say this whole growth thing and all that you're highlighting, if you don't put the problem up in the right framing, in the right light, what we are really trying to solve, you will fiddle away with POCs in forever. You will not have the determination, you will not have the grit, you will not have the ingredients to do what it takes, simply.
No.
So why don't we then, why is this a problem then, or how can we get this out of the alarmist point of view? Because I agree, you can't all be negative, we can't be fear-mongering either. We need to flip it to the positive side, but we need to talk about real goals, we need to talk about real targets. So what is the missing link here? What's the problem here? Why are we not doing it?
Because it's scary.
It is scary. Is that simple?
I think it's that simple. It's
bad for business.
It's bad for business, but I think it's also
newspaper sells on fear mongering. Why don't they pick up on this one?
No, but I think it's difficult to internalize these things on a personal level, and there's huge and humanity is built on hope. There's something fantastically powerful, positive on hope. So I don't want to be bearish on hope. But I think you need both in that, and I think the determination of where you want to go is. And the parallel to parenting is also, it's really hard work to do parenting, and you don't know where you're heading, but you don't give up because you're in it. And climate work is the same. It's really scary, and you know where you want to go, and you're in it. But I think and this is where maybe the constructive part comes in, having the shortening the timeline, I think. And I'm exaggerating a little to make my point, and I've exaggerated a lot to make many points today as my big disclaimer. But if you look at the way that the short-term market works, we're driven by like the next quarter is my exaggeration. But if you have a longer-term view, and I think maybe in the AI analogy works here, if you look at what China is doing, 20, 30 years is a very short-term time span in their strategic thinking. And they decided early on, we want to be the leaders in AI by 2030. And they said that a few years ago. And that means the whole apparatus moves towards the common goal. Corporate capital, infrastructure capital, university degrees, et cetera, which lowers the risk in the whole project because we know what we're going to do. We're setting a legal framework and a mental framework. We're pointing in the right direction. And
now we're talking, because this is the missing. No, we are not doing that.
But
properly.
And this is where I see a huge positive opportunity, because this transformation we're going to do. So it's risk-free in that sense. It's going to happen. We don't know exactly what steps to take and who is on the forefront.
There's no regrets to go in this direction.
No, definitely not. And again, I don't know how the Chinese are thinking, but again, 30 years has never seemed to be a long-term strategy in their book. So, and it's not difficult to look at this from a geopolitical point of view. Owning the infrastructure of the next chapter in human economy will give geopolitical levers. Owning the energy, the infrastructure, the products, the vehicles, the etc. The data will allow you to come out of this transition as a power winner. And if we pit a US Anglo-Saxon camp on one side and a Chinese on the other, and we create an arms race in order to win the green transition, and you can be powered by fear or not in that, but that is an opportunity and that line of thinking doesn't have the same cost-benefit analysis. Because when you talk about geopolitical power and when you talk about it from a military point of view, you can see that it's not about the financial opportunity. It's about existence. And therefore, it happens in a different way. And the processes are clearer and people understand and they move in a quicker way. So I'm moving from the environmental activist into the geopolitical strategist rhetoric.
I think you put your finger on a super important point here, and that's the long-term valuation of our decisions. Whereas you say China have their long-term in their mindset, short-term plans, but they're still super long-term plans from our perspective. And in the US, they have the largest free market economy, fast-moving, that actually rewards long-term value growth. But here we have short-term budgets. And super defragmentization in Europe. So I think we need data to help us, like find out where is value going to be created so our politicians can regulate and help reward that so the investments increase even more. I mean, if you take one of our largest pension funds, the 6th AP fund, I think they have 90, what do you call förvaltare in English, 90 different broker houses that they help invest their money, but they don't aggregate the data at all. If they could do that, they could have the most advanced long-term plans in the world.
And again, we're back to playing chess and understanding the reality for what it is. Okay, so we've signed the Paris Agreement. We know that it's life or death, and even though we don't frame it that way, it's about civilizational collapse. The biggest market failure is so far that we haven't priced in carbon. So it's been a freaking free lunch. And an expensive component hasn't been calculated in anything that we do. This is being changed. 22% of emissions right now is under different types of regulations. And that's obviously moving in the direction of more. I've just released a report on how to create internal carbon pricing to understand the real costs of what you're doing. And if we take the pension funds as an example, we should stress test our pension funds. Create a carbon price, a fictive one, create a low one, and see what's the value of our current pension funds if we add, when we add, because it's going to happen, a price on carbon emitted in the investments that our pension funds have done. Shockingly, they're going to go down in value, maybe by double digits. And that is a painful process. Do you want to wait with that painful process, or do you want to look at that soberly now? Because the quicker we look at that, then we can jointly decide where do we want to be in 10, 15 years' time. What do we need to create in terms of value in order to compensate for this delta, this free lunch that we've ignored? And that will spur innovation, different types of investment, different types of R&D in order to create that delta. But if we don't know what that delta is and we pretend that it's still valued at X, Y, Z, we will continue every day in this fog of not knowing. And this is a simplistic way of thinking about it, but it has to start there. You have to do that uncomfortable mindset shift and then start dealing with the details of how that works.
And that's where bravery and truth, someone willingness to accept the truth comes in.
And he or she might be fired for that.
Yes.
and take that as a badge of honor. I told the truth. This is what our pension fund or our fund is actually worth if we add the real cost of carbon that is there. It's not an addition of something. It's something that we've just previously ignored. And brag that to your children and grandchildren.
If that's someone candidated in the next election, they would get my vote.
Mine too. I get goosebumps.
This is powerful stuff. Let me do one thing now. Let's stop this powerful stuff and let's go another circle and see if we can come back to this powerful stuff, but with
Try and stop us.
new powerful stuff. So this was a path down sustainability. I want to explore the data AI tech part and see where they come back up again, because you've been involved quite a bit in the AI discussion as well. You probably can. By the way, how did you guys get to know each other the first time?
Well, the first time we met was at RAP when you were with Hjalmar, which I remember it's a great example now when you look back at it, with a business model that the world didn't understand.
So let's start here. What is RAP? And let's start with how you connected on this.
There's several versions of that, but I prefer to go down the route of the parody version that became the stand-up comedy roadshow, which is the learning part of it.
Yeah.
We raised a lot of money without having a product market fit. And it was a novel take on how to drive consumption via mobile. And we were early on some levels and we were late on some levels. But I think RAP for me was a big learning curve about the importance of why and the importance of culture when you build a company.
So here is a company, it's a digital native company, an app, a product, RAP, right? And you raised your money and you raised your capital and you were going down this startup route. And how did you? In what sense did you meet? Them?
I was in an agency at that time.
You were working on their
yeah. Come save our asses type of thing, and Kai came.
Help us with our storytelling.
Yeah,
kind of thing. Okay,
but help us with our storytelling. I think that's a very telling sentence.
Yeah.
Because if you at that early stage of your journey need help with your storytelling, there's a core fundamental piece that's missing.
What's the product market fit? What's the
burning problem? Can we really touch it? Can we really understand it? Can we make it clear?
And are the right people building it for the right reasons? I'm very humble now, and I hope it's made me a better investor in the Excel sheet around the business opportunity, the size of the market, and everyone's taking 10% of the size of the market, irrespective of what industry it is, will not materialize unless you actually enjoy solving that problem.
Yes.
And now it said solving the problem, so I'll take that back. Or working on addressing that problem.
Yeah, working on addressing that problem, fulfilling that need that someone has value out of, willing to pay for.
And talent is not as big of a factor as you think here. It's much more about understanding where it itches and just staying in that.
So we have Oliver Edholm here, who is the founder of Depict AI, who is a brilliant young man. They're having fun. They're not missing you right now. No. But he says it with such casual, you need to find this really, really burning problem. You need to understand the burning problem well in terms of, what is missing, or what is the gap, or what is it that the customer needs, or what is... And I think this is core, right? That especially if you're in the tech world, or if you're doing something, you need to have, let's use the word, the burning problem. Then let's not solve it, but let's work on it. And this is so important, regardless if it is now in sustainability or whatever you're trying to do with tech. You need to be really, really sharp. Is this a problem worth solving? Now I used it.
Well, I would say also it's a matter of the discrepancy between the actual problem and the reality. Yeah. In the terms of, I think, Oliver and Depict, there's yes, the leap isn't that big, so it's going to be clear on what we need to do. In the matter of RAP, it was almost like a distortion field where everyone involved, us as an agency as well, felt, wow, this is the way the market should work.
Yeah.
Not the way it works.
No, and the leap to that was so big So it becomes even harder, and almost maybe also the fact that you recruit and attract people that are so driven emotionally by changing the
what
market.
it should be.
Yeah.
But the marketplace weren't really ready or willing.
And because it sparks also a lot of fear, and things have to change in order to be able to sell.
So you get to a point, we have a problem, we can solve it here, but it means the market needs to move here for us to have a fit.
And even before that, the companies that you work with need to move from A to B. And for me, that was a huge learning curve in building Ramp, because...
What do you mean with the companies need to move?
I went from client meeting to client meeting in this ego-boosting, high-fiving, you're amazing fests. So I genuinely thought that we were onto something amazing, and I felt so entrepreneurial and brave and innovative and blah, blah. And then nothing happened. Like, it didn't leave the Big Cheese's office. And that's when I learned how there's a gap between Big Cheese and Company, like a real gap where you can have a high five in the boardroom and nothing happens below that. But two, also the spiel of saying yes to things. And what I didn't understand, it took me a long while because no one told me. They hadn't understood what I said. I had thrown buzzwords and excitement and energy, and this is the future at them.
They love to hear. They love the show.
And it was too embarrassing to say we're against the future.
Or maybe they were just, I mean, I would imagine they were also excited about the future you painted, but maybe that's, you learn now that this is a danger signal, almost like when they get excited, today you'd almost rather take boring in a contract.
Completely. And it's so interesting.
Have you heard the term innovation charades or innovation theater? There's been a couple of articles floating around about, don't get caught up in the, what is the incubator bubble. I mean, this is relating then to big corporations needing to tick the box that we are innovative. And basically,
or sustainable,
the same shit. Mm-hmm. The same. I mean, and typically, then it's easy as a startup to get there's a couple of articles that are quite good on this topic on Medium, and I've seen them on LinkedIn, where basically, this is innovation theater, innovation charades. You go there, you're a startup, and you get spun around, but you're so far from the real, P&L. Back to the P&L. You're not really hitting the P&L. You're not really hitting the agenda. You're not really hitting the real budget. Maybe you're hitting an incubator budget. Maybe you can get a couple of money around to do a POC, so we can put it on media and do that. Are we talking about this a little bit?
Yes,
because
and I think
it's not only the startups that's the problem. It's the innovation theater that is completely going on.
And if I translated that to the sustainability world, no one's going to debate it in the Western world right now. I mean, of course there are people that still do, but in reality, no. And so the next layer of the theater is, so you have the words, and the next is the trenches of the pilots.
Yes. The POC graveyard. We talked about this.
So if you get stuck in this pilot world with small budgets, sandbox, far away from
the real P&L,
for the real P&L, where you can still demonstrate, so you can create either the article in your local business, or just conversational pieces, or you can adhere to the current corporate talk and storytelling about what. So we need to move from pilots, and one of the things that I'm trying to talk about, but it's also quite complicated because it doesn't fit into one-liners. But if the transition is obviously not binary. It's not like we won't solve it. It's not going to be, this is an unsustainable and then we create a decarbonized world. It's a transition. And we know what that means intellectually, but the brain tends to simplify that and create maybe stage 1, 2, or 3 or something like that. So we understand where we're in. And if you look at it in different stages and try to create chronology to adhere to what you want to do, I don't, but I like it. There's technologies that we can use today to make a dent in the carbon emissions. And the problem with using technologies of today to make a dent in emissions is that they're suboptimal. And this comes down to our timing. It is 5 to midnight. It's 1 to midnight. If we would have started 40 years ago when science told us where we were going to go, we might have been able to, we could have created a different type of process, much orderly. But because we're so late in the game, we need to invest in suboptimal. And that also goes against everything that we believe in, knowing that this is more expensive and incorrect, but it will take a big chunk out of where we are. Doesn't sit well, and it's very hard in a corporate view. And then we look at this innovation that's going to take the next chunks out of emission. But we know as investors that the technology that's being built today won't stand a chance until it's in 7-10 years' time. So you need to...
It's not mature yet.
No, you need to space it out. And therefore, the pilots that we're doing today, we need to get out of that mindset and scale them, even though they're pilots, even though we know that it's not perfect, and even though we know that we need to rebuild it, because we're at a timeline. And that's where my fear factor comes back in, because if you have that fear factor, you will allow yourself to take that type of decision. If you see yourself in a war-like situation with an enemy of that
There's no
sort,
going back. You need to move forward because the bridge is falling behind you.
you become less intellectual and rational in your decision-making and a bit more urgent.
But then back, so now we're sort of, you're working with rap, and that's the sort of the tech startup.
See how I did that? Even though you started with rap, I'm back to...
Do you see how I did that?
Yeah.
I got you back. We can fight this back and forth. It's going to be fun. Mm-hmm. But so with rap now, here we are now in the middle of the sort of the startup, hallelujah, super cool. And moving, what's the environment here? Startup, venture capitalist. Who's the venture capitalist for rap? Is it private? Who is the main
Greylock, Reid Hoffman.
Yeah.
And Atomico, Niklas Sennström.
Yeah.
Did the first round. First round was Creandum.
Yeah.
So we had a different type of startup scenario where we got seed capital before we even started building, basically on the back of the credibility of Andreas Ehn, who was the first CTO of Spotify, and Hjalmar and a few others.
So give us a little sneak peek here, because this is to me something we can sort of talk about, and it's super cool. And for most of us, wow. Give us the sort of fly on the wall behind the scenes. What happens here? How did that come about? Can you sort of without disclosing anything?
No.
How does it work? How does it work in reality?
I need to explain that there are different types of flies on the wall here.
Yeah.
And one fly on the wall can give you something who's been through similar types of processes. That can see it for the reality that it is. My version, I came from corporate land. I had no idea what I gave myself into. So it's a much more eye-opening.
Were you starstruck?
No.
Because, did you understand?
I'm very seldomly starstruck.
Because, the names, these are legends. They're normal people. They're normal people.
And I didn't even know who they were. So they're not even normal people. I didn't know who they were properly. Hjalmar Winblad calls me, says, "Hi, my name is, I hear that you eat barbed wire for breakfast." Like, who is this? What is that? And knowing what a good girl and straight-laced
were you still barbed wire? Was he referring to a strap?
I don't know what he was referring to. He was trying to
cool comment.
He's a salesperson, and I am so impressed by his abilities.
Get attention.
Yeah, and it worked. And now I know that once Hjalmar wants something, it happens. And one of the reasons why after rap, I was in the Middle East, and I was loving the Middle East, Hjalmar called again, now knowing that he could use the barbed wire comment. Yeah, he, together with Ted Parsons, asked me to come and join EQT Venture in the build-up phase. I'm like, no. I'm having a ball here in the Middle East. It's exciting. It's
just when you're doing stand-up comedy stuff.
And I'm doing stand-up comedy, and I'm kind of financing my lifestyle-ish. But Hjalmar and my mother wanted the same thing, which was get me home. And that was just completely impossible. Two forces of nature.
Did they even join forces?
No, they were just...
Two different ways. And here basically coming back to do what?
So what Hjalmar had for a long while talked about the importance of capital that understands technology and capital that understands the building process. And I completely understand and adhere to and wanted to build that with him, and I found it a huge opportunity once I got on board that I won't be doing my own thing in the Middle East and I'll be following, is capital on the entrepreneur's premises, and that has a proper understanding of technology and deep pockets in Europe that didn't exist at the time. So,
and why is that important?
Because going through these funding rounds with RAP, and I wasn't obviously the pivotal person in those negotiations, I was a fly on the wall, and I learned a lot in watching how these professionalized funds run by, and I'm being cheeky here, run by bankers, want to fund disruptive ventures at the same time wanting to calculate. And
getting that Excel sheet out for something that is hypothesis
and I kind of thought that it would be Excel sheet driven more, but then also realizing this very male testosterone driven finger in air valuation that is powered by hype and FOMO. So realizing that this is an asset class that's very different from many other asset classes, and it's very emotional, but then deconstructed back as if it were a traditional.
So you everybody knows it's really hypothetical. This could fly, but in the end, it needs to fit the model.
Yeah.
And then the model is actually down to fit very traditional business.
Yeah, it's a very strange world. So I found it fascinating to see how.
Snacka om snuttefilm.
But also how the FOMO works, like
FOMO.
Fear of missing out.
Fear of missing out, FOMO. Yeah.
So what happens in the FOMO is that you get one big cheese to say yes, and the other big cheese wants to be with the first big cheese, and you create. And this
that's
is
part of the game.
That's the fundament of fundraising, and it is an important part of the social game. So I'm not saying it's incorrect. I just saw it firsthand with huge amounts of zeros behind it in a way that I found fascinating, and at the same time, and I applaud that risk taking. I think it's a hugely important part of it as well, because there's one part that's vanity that you can criticize, but there's also one part that's like, we don't know how this is going to work. We don't know how it's going to play out. But there's validity in the direction that you're saying. And I see a genuine sense of company building in this team. And I feel good about myself in this vein, and I want to be a part of, and there's big zeros and I'm going to be rich. So it's very dual. It's not black and white again.
But in the end, is there a formula to pick this? I mean, like, bottom line, I don't think there's a formula here. You have your different ingredients in this.
No, you don't have to be smart. It's hard work. I think it's also down to that. And I learned that again at EQT. I took care of everything that was too early for us. So we had one data-driven element. We built Motherbrain.
Yeah, we had... Wilhelm was here. We had Wilhelm on
there. There you go. So, we know.
And
then in parallel, one poor brain next to the powerful AI that also built relationships and looked at the early stage companies and the early stage accelerators and the early stage VCs. And Hjalmar's thesis, I believe, fully, the early stage investors take the big chunk of the risk. Like that, they put in early money before it's validated, when the entrepreneurs are still deemed crazy. That's when they go in.
They're still pivoting even.
And they're pivoting. And that money is quite operational. And therefore, very rightly, they have a huge say in who gets to be the first institutional money. So Hjalmar's thesis, which I love, is in order for us as a Series A fund, and I say us, but EQT Ventures or any institutional fund, in order for us to be chosen, because it's also a bullshit part of the theater, that it's the capital that is the powerful party in this. The entrepreneurs that are building the extreme companies that will be the big unicorns or disruptors or whatever buzzword you want to use, they choose the capital that get to sit on their cap tables. So what Hjalmar said very humbly, in order for us to be chosen as the preferred venture fund in a Series A, we need to have helped them in the early stages. We don't do investments that early. But Aurore, your task is to go out and help them. So I was a mini concierge service, and I helped a lot of early stage companies find other early stage investors, cross sectors.
So exciting.
But my point why I told this is what I learned then is if you go to Berlin, Munich, London, Amsterdam, you meet lots of entrepreneurs that are addressing the same problem. And they have the same total addressable market. They're all going to get 10% of the market, and they have all the same potential valuations.
But the
Can
point
I,
is...
can I play the devil's advocate here and ask you a
In 2
question?
seconds,
Yeah.
when the differentiating factor is who does it,
Who will get it done?
who will get it done.
Yeah. Who will have the grit? And then we get
and
back
now
to
Kai
grit.
is devil's advocate.
Are all the VCs competing who's best in spotting and evaluating the trend or the actual valuation of the investments?
I think that's a great question. And it's a bit of everything. And I think there's a huge shift in VC at the moment. And I think Hjalmar and the team took one big step in being much more data-driven. So it's a very conservative
But
business.
Motherbrain is a huge... it's a clear point, and how that has grown in 5 years to 25 people.
Yeah.
That is clear commitment to data-driven.
Yes. And that there were embryos of that also on the West Coast in the US, but we were first in Europe to take that investment.
Okay, Motherbrain. Who is Motherbrain's competition? I mean, I know you're not selling Motherbrain on the market, but who is in the VC world has equivalent to what Motherbrain is doing?
You're asking the wrong person at the moment. So I'm not into this space, so I couldn't tell you.
But isn't the next natural continuation of Motherbrain our capital? Or you actually put it into the...
For me, it's an open question. I don't know this game, so I was asking a humble question. I was just curious. That's fine.
But
Let's leave it.
But it depends on how you see that the challenge. Is it about identifying the fund returners
Or the trends.
or the trends? And
exactly. I would just argue there, the fund returners could be the trend as well. If the B run and the C run is still an upgoing trend, as long as you have a big cheese picking up that, in the end, you can still do a multiplier, even if that tanks down the line.
And I think that's exactly the point.
You can always publicly note a company.
The mathematics of venture is something that I learned in EQT, which is still something that's not talked about enough when entrepreneurs approach VCs. They approach them because their idea is great. They approach them because they want funding for something that they're going to build. Yeah. But once you understand the mathematics of the fund that you're approaching, then you can position yourself. And there's been a huge shift in how the funds can return to their LPs, and there are players that have distorted that. So Apple, Google, Amazon, and Microsoft, their war chest has created a completely different market. And then you have a follow-on of corporates. Your SEBX is, SEBX not being the biggest player in the market, but corporate venture funds purchasing way too early from a venture point of view. And at the same time, you have players like SoftBank and Vision Fund that don't do anything under 100 million. And because the trend, as you say, is so attractive, private equity funds and pension funds have gone early. And because their mathematics have been distorted, everything is cheap. They're purchasing, they're distorting the market and paying too much, making it harder for the venture funds that are technology driven. So it's a cultural war, which makes it much harder to be investors today.
And I'm going to circle now back to sustainability.
No, you're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. You're not allowed. Not yet. You can do it soon.
Do it.
No, you do it soon. Do it soon. No,
it still ties back to venture capital.
Because we are right now at a very typical point in time that I usually experience when I have Anders Arpteg going down rabbit holes on deep neural networks. And I get to play the guy. What the fuck are we talking about? So could we unwrap a little bit for someone who is not deep into the VC world? what are we talking about here when there's mathematics, the way you look at valuation and all that, and you laid it out, I think, quite clearly.
But I lost you.
For someone that understood, who's someone who has a little bit more background into this. But so could we sort of dumb it down for me a little bit? Or take it like one step back.
A venture fund is a business idea that has money in and a promise of money out. And some sort of multiple.
Still there.
Everyone's there. And that one of the common myths about how that multiple happens is that you invest in 10
and one will fly.
And one will fly and 5 are okay and the rest will fail.
And this is sort of the business model calculate. This is your Excel sheet, how I project scenarios on these.
But what Ted Persson, our friend and my colleague at EQT Ventures, taught me, and is also that is not evenly distributed, which means that some funds get all the winners and some funds get all the...
So the point is, statistically, probabilistically, if you look at the total population of funds, it's correct. But if you look at each fund, you can have 5 unicorns in one fund and 0 in the other fund.
Yes.
By chance or by stupid investment.
But they are investing in different stages as well.
They're investing in this. So there is
that. So
not too fast now. Not too fast now. Up. Then you're losing me. Continue.
So you want to be one of those in that small percentile that attract the most, which means that it's not a statistical exercise in the amount of investments you make. It's about creating a story and a pull power where the companies that will be those unicorns and disruptors come to you. So it's either data driven by a mother brain, or you are the rock stars and everyone wants you for whatever reason.
So the storytelling you said is like, we want to be, you flipped it. So this is the context now why Hjalmar says, how can we be the ones that the guys who really can make this happen, the real, not the talkers, not the real guys that we think is brilliant, who have the real brain and the real grit, we want to be their first choice.
And here's also where it comes in the importance of the reputation of the fund. Yeah. If I have a startup and I have the luck to get a term sheet from a certain fund, that will increase my reputation and my chances to get the next investment.
This is an echo chamber. Yeah. Like it is self-perpetuating, right?
To a degree.
To a degree.
So not only.
No, but
to a degree. You have kingmakers.
Symbiotic here.
Yeah. So consider that you're in the 70s now and a band needs to be signed. Yeah. Right, that is exactly what you need to think about. So you have like
who should I sign with?
Yeah, so you have Sony Music, you have the other ones, and etc. You're gonna sign with some crappy, company and etc. Right?
If you imagine your agent is going to promise to the next agent that you're going to be even bigger, and then to the next agent that you're going to be even bigger, and all of a sudden you realize I can't play all these songs.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you like that analogy?
Yes, and I think that the elephant in the room in this discussion is that capital is a commodity. The biggest fund or the deepest pockets isn't what counts, and it goes back to, I won't do my whole capitalistic thing now because that's a rabbit hole that we don't have time for. but capital is a commodity, and I think it's that once you've understood that creates a huge sense of humility in how to build a business, what are the parameters that you need in order to do that, and where does the psychology lie in these early stages? Because, and we've touched upon it throughout this conversation, innovation and transformation is hard, and even though you know where you're going, there's a psychological element in taking that first step or being part of that first movement, because you don't know. When you go to the moon, you don't know what's going to happen there. And all of these things come down to pushing your company, your business. And I think I'd like to come back to your comment about fearless. It's interesting because everyone that does a move that someone else doesn't understand, it looks fearless, but it comes from a place, this is where I have to go. And that is the steps, that's what you're looking for.
And I want to get your take on a contradiction that I'm seeing that I'm a bit disturbed by, and that is, on one hand, we see more and more venture capital, early stage investments going into sustainable companies or companies that have a promise or an idea that will change the world into a better direction, and I'm super happy about that. But on the other hand, we see venture capitalists celebrating every time a startup goes public, i.e. rewarding them for short-term gains. And for me, that's a bit of a contradiction. Why that still exists when...
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. And I think we just need to be soberly look at how the financial system works. And at the end of the day, many of these institutions have created 5-7 year time horizons for when they want.
But the large pensions must hold a large responsibility in how they select which funds to invest in, right? Because now they select them by XYZ financial dimensions. But if they were to
but there's still a lot of hypocrisy. So there's a lot of big words, but we continue to follow down the route. I don't want to breach any NDAs that I've signed, but there's also an interest in the market now to create different types of investors that have different perspectives. This whole diversity inclusion element, so the group of people that have invested for the last decades might not all have the mental capacity or the perspectives to take in new shifts. Therefore, we need a venture generation that has different perspectives. And by definition, those investors will have zero track record. They will come from other businesses, other parts of the economy. They will not have a track record of investing, and you can look at the return on that.
And why is it so important to get other types of investors in than what? And
because it's a little boys' club. It's a little white boys' club.
Bottom line, diversity, inclusion, like this. But what are we talking about here? Are we talking about from VC to industrial, or what do you mean?
Everything, all of it. It's a little white boys' club, and I'm exaggerating again to make my point. But in all these, the challenge is, if we've intellectually understood that we need more diversity, inclusion in the financial decision making of which technologies
to focus on,
because they are kingmakers, as we said, they will become the future. So and please excuse my exaggeration, but if the little white boys club decide other little white boys get to build tech, we will have a little white boys world.
Yeah, they're shaping the future. To me, it's mind-boggling that the big pension funds don't have this in place today. But
my point being, I sit now with potential funds that have actually some sort of a mini track record. They have a deal flow that comes from a completely different sector of the economy. They have a different take on society and technology that is, on par with what we want to build. But they can't raise funds because they're first-time investors.
Yes. But the big pension funds.
Because all of a sudden now they are not the preferred Series A type.
It's too much risk.
For everybody now. So this is perpetual back to, we want to be with the...
Yes.
And how do we break that?
So my open question to the audience today is, if you actually have, and we're not talking that much money, if we're a few €100,000 to become the... anchor or the first starting point in this domino game to allow a few funds, and there are not that many players that are doing this right now, to allow them to become operational, everything will flow from it. Because we were joking earlier about everyone wants a selfie with Greta, but they're not doing the job. Everyone wants to talk diversity and inclusion right now, but I can see the struggle to actually opening the wallet.
So we are now talking about some new funds or some venture, like someone that is going down a different path and now getting that off the ground, getting that from slideware and talking to operationalize it. And then how much do they need to raise as a base in total? Like
a few million kroners is the first tranche, because there's huge commitment. If there's an anchor, if there's a first, will come. I just find the psychology of this amazing, and I have huge respect for anyone who raises a fund. It is a hard work, And I don't think I have the grit.
And when
to
you
do
say
it.
raising a fund, what do you define as, what are we talking about here in layman's terms, so I understand?
Raising somewhere from 10 million euros to 100 million euros to invest in technology of sorts.
So partnership of people, private or in different ways. Here we want to invest in tech. We call this a fund.
Yes.
And this is now, we want that to happen outside of the traditional bubble, so to speak.
I want to add an important piece here as well, because now we're talking about someone else, some other people having to make decisions. Everyone's listening, all citizens can also make a big difference, and that is actively choosing where your pension savings are.
I agree.
When you choose an employer, make sure you can control your pension savings and invest them in diverse, inclusive, sustainable funds.
And what is the metrics so I can understand which one is better or worse on this?
Oh,
So-
I'm getting a new job offer. Do you have Avanza or Nordnet? Not? Okay, no, thank you.
Because Avanza and Nordnet allows you to do it yourself.
Yeah, you can do it yourself. You can choose wherever you want.
But I want to put a disclaimer here to make it slightly more complicated, because I completely agree with you, Kai. It's about taking active decisions, but I'd like to nuance the difficulty of a transition. There is no black and white answer here. So if my sister were here, we would have a much more in detail discussion about the challenges of the taxonomy, for example. And that it is a moving target, it's evolving, and there are different parts of taxonomy or different funds or different choices that aren't still not perfect, but they are being evolved, which means that we also need to be active and continue to think about these things and marinate. That's a good point. I haven't thought of that. And then add that in. Because again, we won't be able to solve how we're going to spend our pension funds.
But I want to take it way back, saying like, how can I?
I'm going to have some overshoot while you go do that.
How can I, who are not educated, I have not really started to dig where do I even start to dig into this to better understand which funds? I believe.
Luckily, and I don't remember.
I'm passionate. I really want to do what you're doing.
Google it.
How can
This is actually a good question, actually.
Yeah.
No, so how do I?
And I don't mean Google it as
I
in,
want to contribute with my savings money, and I don't want my fund money or my whatever pension funds going to the wrong stuff. I want to be really active in with my personal money. What the fuck do I do? How do I learn this? Where do I find the knowledge?
Internet.
I hope
Hur ska jag pensionsspara? I've just Googled it for
But I
you.
also hope that in most people's social networks, there's someone who's interested. I mean, I remember my reasoning. This was probably 14 years ago when I decided, how should I pension save?
Yeah.
And I just figured, very luckily now, Tesla. I'll just put everything into Tesla. And because if he doesn't succeed, what's the future going to be like anyway? So it's not going to be a good future to grow old in anyway.
That was a great
50-50
gamble.
Yeah, it was a great 50-50 gamble.
50-50. If the world if he doesn't succeed, the world doesn't. I like that simple rationale.
Or probably not 14 years ago, but like
But
8 years
it
ago.
was a quite good investment.
Yeah.
We have more or less spoken 2 hours, and we haven't really penetrated the AI dimension of Aurora. Should we spend 5 minutes to trying to connect the dots? Because there are many AI dots here to be connected. We will do it, of course, after work here, but 5 minutes.
I think the important aspect that I've learned, and you can ask me nothing about how anything works technically, because I don't understand it. I'm not a.
But you've been deeply in the AI community. So what's
Yes.
your contribution and what you've been doing, and how does it connect to all this?
It's driven by finding the strongest levers to solve the biggest problems, and identifying here is something that we can use as a very powerful tool to create scenarios, to understand, to rationalize decision making, anything. And I'm deeply fascinated. The tech aspect I'm deeply fascinated by as a personally. But it is as a tool and a lever. And I see my role much more about creating what is the framework that we want, and then how do you build a lever. And I'm
But how did you get
equally
into
now
the
worried
AI
about
topic?
quantum computing.
Was it from the venture cap, or did you all of a sudden realize that AI will be if we want to solve some of these problems, probably we need to look back more into the data and AI.
Yes.
So did you where did your passion or interest, not on tech, but on AI as a lever? How was that spark? How did you find that path, or what was the epiphany, so to speak, or did you have an epiphany?
I had several epiphanies, and one was in the investment space, realizing that it's a very powerful lever. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the beauties of working in the venture space. You learn a lot.
So you realize, shit, this is untapped potential so much that can be done with AI.
And I had the privilege of, at the same time, writing a column on the op-ed pages of Svenska Dagbladet. And I took some of my learnings and understandings and epiphanies and wrote a column about it bi-monthly or whatever. And then I moved and I wrote on Svenska Dagbladet näringslivssida. And the epiphany came on the comments. Oh. So the people who read the op-ed pages on Svenska Dagbladet, I don't know how many people, but I know roughly what type of people.
The three.
I roughly know what type of people. And they sit on the levers of society in terms of decision making, both politically and corporate. And the private questions I got, don't tell anyone, I need to know. And how I was brought into one-on-one coaching sessions with people that I thought understood this, and I realized, A, they don't, 2, they find it embarrassing, and then understanding the psychology of what happens when the big ego on the top of the hierarchical pyramid asks the honest question into the corporation, I don't understand, and how uncomfortable that is.
How scary that is.
That's when I realized we have a technology delta here, not in the tech, but in the people.
Yes. Exactly.
So for me, that became a really profound driver, not in necessarily understanding the ins and outs of the exact technology, but following you and Peter and AI in Sweden. Like, how do we evangelize and demystify this in order for it to be part of our normal toolbox?
Can I tell a story about you?
By the way, I think she nailed the entire AI sphere in one sentence.
Yeah, I
Thank
agree.
you so much.
But let me also tell you a story about you, because I think sometimes we understand the potential of something without necessarily putting words on it in our own heads. And this is, I think, 4 years ago, we discussed every crazy idea. But you had the idea of letting AI broker peace. And the potential in it was data's objectivity, to remove all the polarization in a war situation, and that the potential in that. And for me, that's what AI and data can do. It can solve problems and remove all the value loss and energy loss that our human fears put into any equation.
And I still think that's a great idea. I'm bullish about that, creating an AI diplomacy of sorts, and getting help in navigating the complexity. And it might be in the sustainability transition, navigating the complexity.
Yeah. And how do you see now full circle, how do you see AI in relation to sustainability? How big lever is it?
I've become quite cynical, to be honest. So because I've been in the bubble of AI is fantastic and it's going to solve everything, and then seeing the delta where decision makers don't really understand it.
We're stuck in an elevator pitch.
Yeah. I've much more found a role in maybe some sort of the truth saying here as well, which is where it becomes complicated, or where there's ethical issues, or where there's operational, organizational issues. Because as long as you're in this self-congratulatory la-la land that's pink and rosy, it's really hard to get people on board. And if I take the analogy of me being rap and being very excited about that I was building the future, I didn't get people to join my train because I had a slight hybris in that. And I think there's something to be said about a little backlash that creates some sort of humanity in that.
But this from Janet, I mean, like, so maybe then this is, if you follow the hype cycle, you're down in the trough of the you need to go down in it. What was, I can't say the English word of the two glasses of wine. Disillusionment. Trough of the. Can you say it, please?
Disillusionment.
Thank you. No, but I think this is the core, right? That if you want to get this done, you need to at some point go away from the hype, go away from the hybrids, be completely humble of how hard it is. You need to understand the complexity, not complicated, the complexity. So basically you set up a different course. You attack it in a different way. Because if you don't fundamentally understand what you're getting yourself into, it's like going to Mount Everest in your bikini, right? You're not going to last so long. I mean, like, I think that's what we're doing.
Yes.
We're setting out, conquering Mount Everest, but we have not done the training. We are not literate mountaineers. We don't have the equipment. We don't have the base camp. We have nothing.
And there's two approaches. And one is pretending that the bikini is good enough because I know everything because I'm a big cheese.
I'm really good looking, so I can wear a bikini anywhere I
or
like.
the very uncomfortable, fuck, I'm wearing a bikini. And that one is difficult. And
This sounds like an old child's book, an historical one, The Emperor's New Clothes.
Yeah.
But it's such again, we come back to the maturing process of the good girl. The good girl knows everything.
Yeah.
So for me, it's been such a humbling and liberating to say, I don't know. I'm wearing a freaking bikini. And in that, learning, because the learning, and that's a cliche, but it's so true. It's so much more easy to learn once you've identified and explicitly said that you don't know, or you're still in the learning process. And that's when it comes to technology, and that's where I felt that I have a role to play in terms of demystifying. Because, I mean, literally, you can ask me anything in terms of technology, and I couldn't answer it. I just don't know it. And I'm fine with that today. And it's about being fine with it, but also reminding people that progress is so quick. So you can have an expert today, but if he or she stands still, she won't be an expert in 6 months.
So you need to be the expert learner.
You need to be the expert learner, and therefore you can come and start today. The party is open. It's not a closed club. And you should change your name from the Data Club to the Data Fest or the Data Smorgasbord.
Ah, I like it. Where do we take it from here? Because we're already over time. Not over time, because we can stay as long as we want. But for the listeners, we try to wrap it around 2 hours, and we're beyond 2 hours now. Should we have one more question, or should we do the last wrap-up questions? I'm having such a ball, you see. I don't want it to end.
Kai's thinking, I can tell.
You get the last question.
There's a lot of things that are really important that stood out.
And we have so many topics we haven't talked
but
about.
one thing.
Wait. Aubergine. What's aubergine?
Aubergine is the shiniest fruit out there.
No,
Technically,
no.
it's actually a berry.
I was thinking more about the blog.
Aubergine. Yes. So I am genuinely passionate about the aubergine since an early age. I just find it beautiful. And then when I started doing this tour of the Middle East, I casually mentioned it early on because I find it a cute, endearing story. But then it moved into being a much more strategic tool for me because, as I was saying, I realized as soon as I talked about my love for aubergine in a region where aubergine is the foundation of the cuisine, the mood shifted immediately. Whoever I was speaking to, and as I said, I'm not starstruck, so I will go to the top cheese of wherever I am. And within minutes, we were talking about a murmur, a grandma, a recipe, a love or a hate for aubergine.
Well, that's the starting point for the blog.
Now, this is the starting point for the understanding of the parallel business to AI and peace will be aubergine and peace. So it will be a dual.
Those two things. We need AI and aubergine. AIA.
To tackle peace, because as you shift a conversation from a cognitive, cerebral, business-oriented conversation, and you add the element of childhood or family.
You're pulling on different neural strings here.
Something happens, which allows the cerebral to flow, and it allows you to see a mission. You see something much broader, and you can say, or you sound crazily naive, but I've seen it so many times where things happen when the conversation has a different dimension than the cerebral, and it comes out of the gut. And so I'm completely convinced, with a data-driven approach and an AI base, connecting via aubergine in the belly, you can see my hand here.
I do it with you.
You can create something that's hugely powerful and a sense of urgency. And the blog was a way to talk about a few of these things, because I just love writing.
So, but because I love that, because there is a bigger picture here, but then you write a blog and you write different stories, and when you know the bigger picture, what you're going for, all these stories are neurons on this theme, right?
Because you can't be explicit always. It's the power of the subliminal is also something that one shouldn't neglect. Again, with humor, or there's so many ways of doing what you want to achieve, and I'm trying to play the whole smorgasbord of different stools.
But having a blog, is that fun? How long have you had it now?
I've had it for a while, but I haven't been that active. Now it's been much more writing the column in Svenska Dagbladet and then moving on to reports. But finding an outlet to write and publish, because there's something that happens in the moment you press send. Even though you have no audience, you potentially could have an audience, and therefore you become slightly more stringent in your thought process. So you sharpen yourself intellectually.
Writing process allows you to take blurry thoughts and trying to put it on paper. Synthesizing is quite good.
Yeah, it's very important. Hard work.
That was my stupid side question from the beginning. You get one, and then we have two wrap-up questions.
I think what stuck in my mind was the difficulty you mentioned in the beginning when you're speaking at a conference and they ask for a title. That's so concrete in capturing the problem. Whenever we discuss and we meet people, we always talk about this, the need to constantly evolve, the need to get away from structures, but the world keeps wanting you to no, you have to have this title. Can you just put an aubergine?
An aubergine spin on that one?
Yeah, or as a title?
Yes, so there's two ways of doing it. One is you create your own title.
Yeah. No.
So I've created my own title, which is Tech Diplomat.
That's good.
Which has connotations to something else, and then is giving up on the concept.
Yeah.
And being preemptive. You are going to ask me for a title, I don't have one. Feel comfortable with it. But that really requires you, and I'm now giving you insight into my emotional process, that really requires you to leave the good girl behind.
Yeah.
I don't have a title, deal with it.
Yeah.
So that is sort of, then you arrived.
But it's limiting. In a structured world, it is limiting. So you have to accept. It's in Sound of Music. God closes a door but opens a window. You need to know that you close a door to certain types of arenas in doing that.
When you don't have a title, yeah.
And in the same way, the big cheese that we said, please take these decisions. Look at what your fund is valued at with a carbon price. You risk closing a door. You risk being fired. But another window will arise when you keep your moral compass straight.
But if you don't close doors, you'll die inside eventually.
There you go.
I think we we are ending on that note. I love that. Open the windows. Focus on the windows.
It's okay to close the door.
Two last simple questions. What is happening next?
Who are you? What's your name?
Yeah. What's sort of? You have something fun happening next 2022. What sort of private or something exciting?
2022, I think, is a fantastic year for me privately. I'm very much looking forward to it. I've done a lot of mental gardening in order for things to blossom. So I look forward to my New Year's resolutions. And
I was going to ask them, do you have one?
And I say New Year's resolutions because that's the old classic term for it. But very early on, I decided I don't want New Year's resolutions. I will decide a New Year's theme and choose a spiritual guide. And since many years back, my spiritual guide, and I haven't fired him yet, is Captain Jack Sparrow.
Captain Jack Sparrow as my guide. I love that.
Captain Jack Sparrow.
I really like that.
He gets the choice. Do you want to find the treasure or save the princess? And Captain Jack Sparrow makes some sort of drunken hiccup and says, I want both. I don't accept the premise of the question. And as a good girl, having that as a guideline, I don't accept the premise of the question. I can decide what's important and what I'm going to do. I want the girl and the treasure.
I love that.
Love it.
I so love it. Last question. Who would you want to see on a podcast or listen to on a podcast like this? You know, to go nuts, go down rabbit holes, do what we did today. Do you have any recommendations as great guests that we should talk to that are willing to say the hard questions, talk about the pink elephant like I think we did today?
And they will have to answer for themselves if they want to go down the rabbit holes. But I would love to hear, and I was asked a similar question in a similar pod, I would love to hear someone that comes from high-ranking diplomacy. I would love our foreign minister or a foreign minister of a country to look at the digitalization and the geopolitical challenges that comes with any type of transformation. And for you from an AI perspective, but also from a sustainability point of view, but also maybe a high-ranking military. You and I, Kai, we organized an AI summit, and I had the opportunity to interview Generalleutnant Mikael Claesson, and talking to someone high-ranking in the military and their perspective, their analysis as a different way, and from
geopolitical discussion around what data
adds
and AI.
An element to this conversation, and that is breaking silos as well in terms of building networks.
Fantastic. I think we end on that note.
Thank you.
Any comments from you? No
Time
comment.
for aubergine.
Time for aubergine.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for everyone for listening.